We all know that saying, trust your gut, right? Like, it's interesting how often that intuition turns out to be right. But what if it's like more than just a feeling? Today we're doing a deep dive into this UCLA study that gives a whole new meaning to that phrase, trust your gut.
It really does.
Huh.
It was published in iScience, and this study provides some of the most concrete evidence yet of a direct line of communication between the gut microbiome and the brain, specifically through the vagus nerve.
So we're talking about actual signals being sent,
Yeah,
not just some vague sense of connection.
exactly. And
Alpha.
to understand how groundbreaking this is, we need to start with the study's unique approach. They use something called germ-free mice.
Okay.
These mice are raised in a completely sterile environment, meaning they have absolutely no bacteria living in their guts.
Wow.
Yeah, it creates a sort of blank slate, allowing researchers to isolate the impact of the microbiome.
That's fascinating. So what happened when they compared these germ-free mice to mice with a normal microbiome?
Well, the first thing they noticed was that the germ-free mice had significantly lower vagus nerve activity. It's like the lack of a microbiome was causing a sort of quietness on the line.
So even at baseline, without any external stimuli, the presence or absence of those gut bacteria was making a difference.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But here's where things get even more interesting. When they introduced gut bacteria to these germ-free mice, their vagal activity jumped right back up to normal levels.
Wow, that's pretty compelling evidence of a direct link.
Yeah.
But I imagine they didn't stop there, right?
You're right. The researchers wanted to take it a step further, so they designed another experiment. This time, they worked with normal mice that had a healthy, thriving microbiome. They introduced antibiotics directly into the small intestines of these mice to disrupt that existing bacteria.
Okay, so disrupting the gut environment to see what happens to the vagus nerve signals. What did they observe?
As you might expect, the vagal activity decreased after the introduction of antibiotics. But here's the catch. This decrease only occurred in the mice that already had a complex gut microbiome. In the germ-free mice, the antibiotics had no effect whatsoever on the vagal activity.
So it wasn't just the mere presence of any bacteria that mattered, but the specific types of bacteria being affected by the antibiotics.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's one of the key takeaways here. This finding points to the crucial role of certain substances produced by specific types of gut bacteria in stimulating the vagus nerve.
So disrupting those specific bacteria with antibiotics had a measurable effect on the signals being sent. Did they try to bring that activity back in any way?
They did, and this is where it gets even more fascinating. After introducing the antibiotics, they flushed them out and replaced them with intestinal fluids from normal mice. And incredibly, that restored the vagal activity.
So something within those fluids acted like a sort of jump start for the nerve signal.
Exactly. But they didn't stop there. To confirm their suspicions, they tried the same thing using intestinal fluids from germ-free mice. And in that case, nothing happened. The vagal activity remained low.
So it wasn't simply the fluid itself, but some specific substance produced by the bacteria in those normal mice. Almost like a chemical messenger stimulating the vagus nerve.
That's precisely what they found. This strongly suggests that specific substances produced by gut bacteria are directly responsible for stimulating that communication pathway. And impressively, they were able to identify those key players.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What were these mysterious messengers?
The research pinpointed two key groups: short-chain fatty acids and bile acids. These metabolites, which are produced by the gut bacteria, were found to directly stimulate the vagus nerve activity.
So we're not talking about a vague gut feeling. We're talking about actual measurable compounds sending signals from our gut to our brain. What are the implications of this finding?
This is where it gets even more fascinating. It turns out that different metabolites actually activated different groups of neurons within the vagus nerve, each with its own unique response pattern. Think of it like a complex communication network with different signals triggering different specific responses.
So rather than a simple on or off switch, this is more like a nuanced conversation happening between the gut and the brain, with different bacteria contributing to different parts of that dialogue.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And this activation wasn't just limited to the vagus nerve itself. They found it extending all the way to neurons in the brainstem, which solidifies a very clear pathway for communication from the gut to the brain.
Wow, that's remarkable. This is much more than just a gut feeling. It's a complex system that we're only beginning to understand. Where do we go from here?
Well, this discovery raises a lot of questions and opens up a whole new world of possibilities. We'll dive into those implications and future directions right after this.
Okay, so we've established that there's this intricate communication network between the gut and the brain, with these microbial messengers metabolites playing a key role.
Mm.
What does this mean for our understanding of health and disease?
The implications are huge. This research provides very solid evidence for how the gut microbiome can influence the brain. It opens up a whole new way of thinking about health and disease, especially when it comes to conditions that we've traditionally thought of as separate.
So we're talking about more than just digestive issues.
Absolutely. This study could revolutionize how we approach treating a range of conditions, including neurological disorders.
How so?
Think about conditions like anxiety or depression. We already know there's a connection between these conditions and imbalances in the gut microbiome. But this research helps us understand the mechanisms at play. We're starting to see how those imbalances might be directly affecting brain function.
So instead of simply observing a correlation, we're now starting to understand the cause and effect. That's a big deal.
It really is. It opens up possibilities for developing more targeted and effective treatments. Imagine being able to treat neurological disorders by modulating the gut microbiome through diet, probiotics, or other interventions.
So instead of simply managing symptoms, we could potentially address the root cause by changing the messages being sent from the gut to the brain. What are some of the other conditions that could be impacted by this research?
Irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, is a great example. It's often viewed as a purely gastrointestinal issue. But if we consider the gut-brain connection, it becomes a much more complex and interconnected problem.
Because if the gut is sending signals to the brain, and the brain is sending signals back to the gut, it becomes like a two-way street.
Exactly. By understanding the specific signals being sent through the vagus nerve, we may be able to develop much more targeted and effective therapies for these sorts of conditions as well.
That's incredible. It's like we're cracking a code that could completely change the way we approach healthcare. But this all raises a really interesting question. If our gut bacteria are sending signals that affect our mood and behavior, does this challenge our understanding of things like free will? Are we really in control of our choices, or are we being influenced by these tiny organisms?
That's a question philosophers and scientists have been wrestling with for centuries, and this research definitely adds another layer of complexity to the debate. It's fascinating to think about.
Because it's not just our genes or our environment shaping who we are, but also this entire unseen world of microorganisms living inside us. It really changes the way we think about what it means to be human.
It really does. It's a humbling reminder that we're part of a much larger ecosystem, both internally and externally.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening conversation so far, but where do we go from here? What are the next steps for researchers in this field?
Well, this study has created a surge of excitement and possibilities in the scientific community. Now that we have a clearer understanding of how gut-brain communication works, we can start exploring those possibilities in a more focused way. One area that holds a lot of promise is personalized medicine.
What does that look like in the context of the gut microbiome?
Imagine being able to analyze an individual's gut microbiome and tailor treatments based on the specific types of bacteria and metabolites present. It would move us away from a one-size-fits-all approach to a much more targeted and effective strategy.
So we could move from a general approach of taking probiotics to a much more specific approach, targeting individual pathways and imbalances.
Exactly. That level of precision is going to be key in unlocking the full potential of the gut-brain connection. And it's not just about developing new drugs or treatments. This research has implications for our everyday choices, like our diet and exercise habits.
Because those choices directly impact our gut bacteria.
Precisely. We're just beginning to grasp how lifestyle factors influence the gut microbiome, and how, in turn, that impacts brain function.
So it's not just about finding a magic pill. It's about making conscious choices that support a healthy, balanced gut microbiome. What are some of the things people can do to cultivate that healthy balance?
Diet is a great place to start. Focusing on a diverse, plant-based diet rich in fiber is crucial for feeding those beneficial bacteria.
So those leafy greens and colorful vegetables really do make a difference. What about fermented foods?
Fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, and sauerkraut are excellent sources of probiotics. These foods help introduce a wider variety of beneficial bacteria into the gut.
It seems like our grandparents were onto something with their emphasis on eating fermented foods. What other lifestyle factors play a role?
Stress management is crucial. Chronic stress can really disrupt the delicate balance of the gut microbiome, which then negatively impacts brain function.
So taking time for relaxation, mindfulness, and stress reduction isn't just about feeling good in the moment. It's actually contributing to a healthier gut-brain connection.
You got it. And let's not forget about the power of exercise. Regular physical activity has been shown to promote a diverse and thriving gut microbiome. So moving our bodies isn't just good for our muscles and cardiovascular system, it's good for our gut bacteria as well.
I love that. It's all connected. What about sleep? Does that impact the gut microbiome?
Absolutely. Getting enough sleep is fundamental for maintaining a healthy gut microbiome.
So prioritizing consistent restful sleep is another way to support that balance. It sounds like we have a lot of power to influence the health of our gut microbiome through our daily choices.
We do. It's empowering to know that we have a significant degree of control over this complex system within us. And the more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to discover. This research is just the tip of the iceberg.
This is all so fascinating. But I have to admit, it's also a bit overwhelming. There's so much we still don't know, and the more we learn, the more complex it gets.
That's the beauty of science, though, isn't it? It's a never-ending journey of discovery. And with each new finding, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Even when it feels overwhelming, it's also incredibly exciting.
Because it opens up possibilities we never even imagined. Makes you wonder what other mysteries are hidden within us, just waiting to be uncovered.
It really does. It's a reminder to approach the world with a sense of curiosity and wonder, knowing that there's always more to learn.
This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. Our understanding of the gut-brain connection has shifted dramatically. It's not just a gut feeling anymore. There's a real measurable and complex conversation happening within us.
It's a paradigm shift in how we understand health and disease, and it's only the beginning. Imagine the incredible discoveries that await us as we continue to explore this fascinating frontier.
Speaking of discoveries, before we wrap things up, I'd love to circle back to that intriguing question about free will and the influence of our gut bacteria. It's a mind-boggling concept.
It really is. If our bacteria are influencing things like our mood, our appetite, and even our decision-making, it does make us question what it means to be in control of our own lives.
Are we truly autonomous beings? Or are we more like elaborate ecosystems intricately shaped by the trillions of microorganisms that live within us?
It's a profound thought, and it challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about who we are and what drives our thoughts and actions. But I don't think it diminishes our sense of agency. If anything, it expands our understanding of the interconnectedness of all things.
It's almost a spiritual concept in a way, recognizing that we are not isolated individuals, but part of a larger interconnected web of life.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that our health and well-being are not solely determined by our individual choices, but by nurturing the delicate balance of the entire ecosystem within us and around us.
Well, on a thought-provoking note, we'll bring part 2 of this deep dive to a close. Join us for part 3 as we explore some of the practical steps you can take to nurture a healthy gut-brain connection and unlock your full potential. Welcome back to the deep dive. In the previous parts, we explored this incredible UCLA study highlighting the gut-brain connection, a communication pathway far more complex than we ever imagined. But knowing this connection exists is one thing, actually doing something with this knowledge is another. So let's get practical. What can the average person do to nurture this connection?
Well, it's empowering to realize we have more influence over the system than we might think. And a lot of it comes down to, lifestyle choices.
Okay, so not just a quick fix, but long-term habits that make a difference.
Exactly. And perhaps the biggest lever we have is diet.
Makes sense. What we put in our bodies must impact the tiny residents making a home there, right?
It's fuel for that entire ecosystem. A diverse plant-based diet, rich in fiber, is essential. Think leafy greens, colorful vegetables, whole grains.
So the advice our grandparents gave us was actually spot on.
There's often wisdom in traditional practices, and it's not just about what we eat, but also how we prepare it. Fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, those are all powerhouses for introducing beneficial bacteria into the gut.
I'm seeing a pattern here. Things that have been around for centuries, they seem to naturally support this gut balance we're talking about.
Our ancestors, even without the science we have now, figured out what worked. But modern life throws us curveballs. Stress, for instance. Stress can really disrupt the gut microbiome, so finding healthy ways to manage that stress is key.
So those meditation apps, yoga classes, even just taking a walk in nature, they're doing more than just calming us down in the moment.
They're contributing to a more resilient, balanced gut, which then sends those positive signals to the brain. And let's not underestimate the impact of exercise. It's not just good for our bodies, it actually promotes a healthy gut microbiome.
It's amazing how interconnected it all is. Even getting enough sleep, that plays a role too, doesn't it?
Sleep is absolutely crucial. It's like hitting the reset button for the gut. When we're sleep deprived, everything gets thrown off.
So it's not just about feeling grumpy in the morning. It's disrupting that communication happening inside us.
Precisely. And what's so encouraging is that these are all things within our control. It's about making conscious choices to nourish not just our bodies, but that entire internal ecosystem.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive, from groundbreaking research to practical tips. But before we wrap up completely, I can't help but go back to that philosophical question we touched on earlier. If our gut bacteria are so influential, what does it mean for free will?
Yeah, it's a question that sticks with you, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But maybe that's okay. The fact that we're even asking the question shows how much this research is shifting our perspective.
Instead of seeing ourselves as solely in control, we're recognizing the intricate interplay between ourselves and this universe of microorganisms within us.
It's humbling, isn't it? This realization that we're not just individuals, but complex ecosystems intertwined with these tiny life forms influencing us in ways we're only beginning to understand.
It does make you wonder, though, if those bacteria are playing a role in our decisions, does it diminish our own sense of agency?
I don't think so. Maybe it's more about expanding our understanding of agency. Yes, there are influences we can't fully control, but within that, we still have choices to make, ways to nurture the environment within us to create the conditions for the best possible outcomes.
So it's not about feeling powerless, but realizing there's a partnership at play.
Exactly. We're not just passengers. We're active participants in this incredible dance between ourselves and the trillions of organisms that call us home.
What a profound way to think about it. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the gut-brain connection. We've gone from the concrete science of that UCLA study to the far-reaching implications, and even touched on those philosophical questions that make you pause and really think.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. And for all of you listening, I encourage you to keep digging deeper into this fascinating topic. There's a wealth of information out there. Keep learning, keep exploring, and maybe, most importantly, keep trusting your gut, because it might just be smarter than you think.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those guts healthy.